Hello. Well, having just spent the last 15 minutes arguing over who's going to start,
I won.
I'm Janice Fiamingo, and I'm starting off this session of Regarding Men, where red pill isolation comes to die a glorious, quick death, and where we hold men in high regard. And I'm joined here by my two recalcitrant friends, Paul Elam of paulelam.com and Tom Golden of Men Are Good.
Men Are Good.
And today we're going to have a bit of fun, I hope, with a special issue on masculinity in the magazine Jezebel. Oh, just hold on a minute.
I wanted an issue on masculinity from Jezebel.
Just what you wanted. But before we get to that, there's a Zoom call I have to take from my husband.
Uh-oh.
Oh, he says, be careful that you don't do a Tobin. Oh, no, just joking.
Is he talking to Paul and I or what?
Just trying to be current. Just was reading about poor old
Is that
Tobin.
One of your stuffed animals?
Don't mention the stuffed animals or the voices. Anyway, no, to be serious, we're addressing this. It's a special issue of the magazine Jezebel. I have to admit, don't read Jezebel on a daily basis or even a regular basis. I know it's been around for a long time. It was started in 2007. I think it's a relatively popular feminist women's magazine. And last week they had a special issue called Masculinity Week: the Final Frontier. I did click on that. I thought maybe there'd be some editor's explanation of why they decided to call masculinity the final frontier, but nobody even bothered to try to explain it. And that is, I think, typical of a lot of the articles in this special edition. They use a lot of attempted witty phrases and sort of aphoristic utterances, many of which don't make very much sense. Each of us has chosen an article from this special issue to discuss, and we'll make some general comments about the articles overall as well. The article that I chose, for obvious reasons, was by a woman named Molly Osberg. There's a cat fight going on right behind me. Stop that, guys.
Get him, Nandor.
Yeah, Nandor will win for sure. My article is by Molly Osberg, How Men's Rights Activists Swallowed the World. I really can't tell you after reading that article exactly what she meant with that reference to swallowing the world, except I guess that she meant that men's rights rhetoric has gone mainstream, and this is something that should concern us all. Yeah, but she didn't give many examples or make much of an argument about that. Overall, I guess my first takeaway from reading most of the articles in this week's edition, I would say that you can certainly see where a lot of the graduates with degrees in gender studies have found employment. We always hear about how, there'll be nothing for these people to do when they get their degrees and go out into the real world. Well, unfortunately, one of the areas in which they do find employment is for these various women's magazines and various newspapers that have whole sections devoted to feminist issues. And the result, I think, is an incredible amount of very predictable, frivolous, and extremely self-indulgent so-called pseudo-analysis. And my conclusion from reading, this cadre of feminist ideologues and the many others that we've had cause to talk about on Regarding Men is that the ascent of identity politics, especially feminist identity politics in our culture, has led to a precipitous decline in the general quality of what is called journalism in North America. And that is really overtly on display here. The lack of any kind of serious research, the refusal to actually make arguments about the subjects that are being addressed, the narcissism and dishonesty of so much of what is presented as fact or as informed commentary. Well, it's dispiriting. So
there it is.
Yeah.
It's a shame fest.
Yeah.
That's all about shame.
That's what it is. And it seems that there is almost no version outside of an extremely narrowly defined feminist approved version of masculinity that is not shamed and discussed with contempt and deep dislike. And of course we have 20 articles here, 19 of them written by, would you think it would be maybe by men? No, of course not. 19 out of the 20 articles on masculinity are written by women. The one by a man, the very courageous and important mainstream subject that he decided or was allowed to address is about a skincare regime. That's the one male authored article, a new skincare regime that this fellow decided to try out. And there was a wonderful paragraph in which, as he confesses a new worry about wrinkles and an interest in seeing whether a very expensive skincare line might make a difference to his face, he does say, "Oh, and it's worth noting that I am a cis white guy. Apologies." And he goes on to say, I bring this up.
He apologizes.
He does. He actually apologizes, and not ironically in any way. I read on to think, well, maybe he's kind of making a joke out of it. This is by now, such a standard thing, the male apology, that maybe he's kind of playing with it a little bit. No. He's showing his feminist credentials by confessing right up front that he knows that unlike women, he is not victimized by the cosmetic industrial complex. He is not bombarded by messaging every day telling him that he needs to work on his face and that if he fails to do so, he has failed as a woman. So even before he can launch his very feminine discussion of skincare regimes, he has to apologize for not having been victimized in the way that women are by the cosmetics industry. You can't make this stuff up.
You cannot make that up.
What a simp.
Poor guy.
Yep. So who wants to go first?
Feel sympathy for him? This groveling, poor excuse of any kind of manhood at all is an apologist for all of us. I mean, I think that's what he's trying to say, that we all should apologize.
Yes, exactly.
And
that's exactly what he's saying.
Pardon me, but fuck that.
Pardon me too, but fuck that. I agree 100%. It's crazy. And I think that part of what we're seeing here is that the feminist idea is so contracted and so compact in its ability to see the world that it can't venture out from that. It's like this tight little ball of the way the world is. Yeah. And if you go beyond that even a little bit, it's become something that's terrible. And this is indicative of people who are immature and people who don't feel good about themselves. Because if you look at people who feel really good about themselves, rarely do they criticize other people so much.
And they don't apologize for who they are. The self-respect doesn't do that. But Janice, I'm wondering, even more importantly than any of this stuff, is there any deep penetrating insights on male skincare that I should know about?
Well, he did come to the conclusion that there was no difference. Forget how long he actually used this very expensive line of skincare products. And he felt that at the end, he couldn't say that his skin looked any worse, but he couldn't say that it looked any better. So he was, there it goes.
He was certainly decisive.
Yes.
He was very decisive. Yep. So, so that's what's allowed. And there were a few glimmers of approval of certain very limited forms of masculinity in these discussions. And the one, I guess, there was one. There was an article on soft masculinity as it is being performed by certain guys, like mostly, I think, artists, like musicians and young musicians on TikTok. And there was a kind of grudgingly and somewhat suspicious analysis of what's called soft masculinity. And this is young guys who, paint their nails and wear makeup and wear kind of feminine outfits and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And there was the sense of, okay, these guys are moving in the right direction, although we still have to be very suspicious about whether this is just a cover for the same old machismo objectification of women and predatory attitudes. That this could be a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yes.
So she was not by any means entirely positive about soft masculinity, but she kind of liked it and thought it was at least an encouraging sign of movement in the right direction. I guess this is the kind of thing that Professor Eric Anderson talked about at the last ICMI in London, about guys who don't define themselves as masculine, which Professor Anderson claimed was a increasingly normal trend. Guys who kiss other guys, guys who are in touch with their feminine emotional side, that kind of thing. So that was, that was seen as a potentially a good development for masculinity. Yeah. Other than that, pretty well everything that was discussed was heartily condemned. Yes. With a hearty dose of contempt.
I think that's
the right to be wary, because we all know that, soft masculinity is like soft arsenic. You can soften it down, but, there's men underneath all that.
That's right.
There you go.
The worry, yeah.
But I think that's a theme that developed in a lot of these. And I didn't read all of them, but I read a couple of them. And the theme is, the more like women you are, the more masculinity is better. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is this compact worldview of only seeing things from my eyes and from my body, and understanding women are the way it should be. And is he like us? If he is, then he must be a really masculine. It's like, this is crazy. It's absolutely insane.
Mm-hmm. And it's the level of narcissism and the blindness that produces is just, it's an object lesson in what feminist ideology does to one's intellectual curiosity or, reason or ability to actually understand and perceive the world on its own terms. Because at the same time as over and over again, the message is being conveyed that the only acceptable form of masculinity is a masculinity that apologizes for itself and tries to be feminine. Right. They scoff at any men who object that feminism promotes feminization of men. It's just amazing. Even while they are promoting it, they scoff at men who claim that feminists promote it.
Exactly.
Hey,
crazy.
I say crazy. And it sounds like, looking through, I did not read all of the articles. I read through several of them, and all of it just strikes me as some, coffee house conversation that came up among pseudo-intellectuals, expressing these just purely insipid theories that make no sense at all, that don't lead anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's worse than that. I think that it's basically all of these articles were shaming men and shaming masculinity. And they were doing the best they could to put men down. This was not a group of articles that was about understanding masculinity or defining masculinity or asking men what it was like to be men. No, this was a series of articles that was literally geared to shame men and masculinity as much as they possibly could. The article I'm going to talk about, that's basically the whole thing, is the shaming that went on. Yeah. Which is just amazing to me. And if you want, Jan, I'll go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm just, the article title was King, Warrior, Magician, Revisionist, the enduring masculine book that romanticizes Cro-Mags. Okay. And they're talking about this book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette, which is actually a really fine book. It's a book that looks at masculine maturity. And how can a man become a mature man? You would think that feminists would love this book, because it talks about this path that men should take in order to get to become mature. And it says, and here's a side road. You go down that one, you're in trouble. But if you take this road, you're more than likely going to be mature. It's an amazing book, really, and I've just not done it justice by that little piece, but it's fascinating stuff, and it's based on Moore was a Jungian analyst, and he was a fascinating and brilliant man. And the book is really a fascinating and brilliant book for men. So it shocked me when I saw this article about that book. I thought, what are they going to say that's bad about this book? And what they said that was bad about the book was shaming men for even liking it.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Shaming men who do inner work. Here's a quote. The book isn't just beloved by men waving around guns on social media. King, warrior, magician, lover is also embraced by long-haired men who carry wooden staffs, beat drums in the desert, and talk about inner work.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're shaming inner work. And this is the same magazine that I'm sure in that daggone same edition, there were articles that said, well, men should be doing inner work.
Exactly.
Men should be getting out there. They should be understanding things from a woman's perspective. They should be doing this inner work. But here they're saying, oh, these men, these silly men doing inner work, they're shaming it.
Yeah.
Ay, ay, ay. Shaming men who connect with each other. Here's a quote. These are among the same concerns raised by feminists back in the 90s in response to the rising mythopoetic men's movement, which popularized weekend retreats where privileged men traveled into the woods and went wild, and of which this book was a major influence. Well, that is one of the dumbest sentences I think I've read in a long time. I was involved in the mythopoetic piece, and I loved it. It was fantastic. It was men being around other men, telling the truth about their lives, telling their truth about themselves, really getting to know each other in a very deep, intimate sort of way. And what does the media do? The media shames them for it. It's exactly what they complain about men not doing, and they throw the shame on. They throw the shame on top of it. There's something wrong with men for getting close to each other. Yeah. You better believe the media sooner or later is going to come to regarding men and find, men are getting close to each other here. This is a problem.
Yeah.
And more threateningly, they are talking about their lived experience, honestly. It's what they hated about the mythopoetic movement. It's what they hate about MRAs. It's what they hate about PUAs. They hate about MGTOW. They hate about incels. They hate about anybody who has taken the divergent path away from blue pill living, because that involves men looking each other in the eye and saying, this is what happened to me.
Yes.
And I did X, Y, and Z. Feminists do not want that conversation.
And why not, Paul?
Well, it destroys their narrative, for one.
Yes.
It destroys everything that they believe in, and it leaves men in control of their own lives.
Yes, and it takes the focus off of women.
Yes.
If men start really relating to each other and loving each other, not having sex, just loving each other, what's going to happen to the women's? I mean, I think that's part of what scares them.
Yeah.
And in a sense, this is what this whole Masculinity Week and all feminist writing is about, is like, you guys are starting to talk about your own problems.
Right.
You have that. You must come back to talk about women's problems.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Anyway, the next shaming piece from this article was that men need to be in touch with their inner feminine. You see, again, they're pulling back to this contracted idea that men need to be like us. And here's the quote. What is missing is not, for the most part, what many depth psychologists assume is missing. That is, adequate connection with the inner feminine. They wrote, instead, men need an adequate connection to help the deep instinctual masculine energies. God, isn't that the truth? I mean, men need to honor their instinctual masculine energies. They need to be able to understand that, to sit with it and be okay with it. Mm-hmm. That's in my book as a therapist, that's a priority over top of the inner feminine by a long shot.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
But they don't believe that, and that's why this particular strand of men's inner work outrages this writer and many feminists, is that they go apoplectic if anybody suggests that there is actually a substance to masculinity.
Yes.
That there is really something, because in that very article,
that's a good point.
That's what she was going crazy about, that this is all about gender normativity. In other words, the idea that there is an essence to masculinity. gender essentialism. Again, the idea that there is something we can call masculinity, masculine essence. She hates all that.
Yes.
It's amazing. Yeah, like, I mean, and like the arrogance of these callow gender studies majors, but this is exactly what they learned in Gender Studies 101, sitting there and telling men that there is no essence to masculinity. So your interest in getting in touch with it, your interest in developing it, your interest in valorizing traditions that highlight it and allow you to enact it, all of that is counter to the feminist narrative, and they say all of it is based on a lie. It's like the utter denial of biology and the utter denial of men's own awareness of who they are as men.
Yes.
Exactly. It runs through every one of these pieces, and it's especially overt in this one. It starts off with a reference to that guy Elliot Hulse, right? Who he's a kind of bodybuilder fellow, I think, who's really into helping men build their physical selves and through that also get in touch with their masculinity. And they, they just despise anything like that.
Yes.
I think that's exactly why they go back 30 years to take shots at the mythopoetic movement, because one of the most valuable things that came out of the mythopoetic movement was an examination of what happens in the lives of men when you remove essential masculinity.
Yes,
from their lives.
Exactly.
And the lack of maturity that comes with that.
Yes.
Sometimes criminality, sometimes all the things that feminists love to say are toxic masculinity are actually a product of an absence of masculinity in the lives of those men.
Good point.
And there's research backing this up. This is not just speculation. This is absolute truth. And what feminists seem to want is feral.
Is themselves.
Oh, yeah, that.
That's what they want.
Emotionally, anyway, and intellectually, quite feral. Because there's no rhyme or reason to any of this stuff.
Well, that's the thing. Like, she quotes from this book talking about the distinction between immature masculinity, which can lead to the path of violence and disorder and all sorts of social dysfunction, and then mature masculinity, which is what the book promotes. Right. And she just scoffs at it. Like, I mean, these are men interested in being the best they can be and making a contribution to their society, ending violence against women, as well as other forms of violence, creating secure, prosperous civilizations. And all she can do is yawn at it with contempt.
Because mature masculinity, after all, is femininity.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, that's it.
What we see is brittle narcissism. It's this brittle narcissism where if they were to accept something else, they would break. I mean, it's almost like that. Yeah. And of course, one more thing about this article, they did get some men to come in and comment on things. And guess who the man was they had to comment?
Guess who? I think their names were Michael and Michael, weren't
Kimmel
they?
Something. Michael
Kimmel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there another one too? Is there Michael Kaufman, or am I getting?
I forget. Kimmel was all I saw was Kimmel, and that was enough for me.
Yeah.
Maybe Michael Flood. It seems like there is a.
they're all named Michael. There were definitely there were a few Michaels there, and they were saying that these were white cisgender men doing their thing out in the wilderness. They scoffed at it, and it was horrible.
And he says Kimmel said it's men wandering through anthropological literature like postmodern tourists, as if the world's cultures were an enormous shopping mall filled with ritual boutiques. It's like he has just got no idea what happened. Zero idea what happened.
Me Too'd.
What's that?
Didn't Kimmel just get Me Too'd?
That was a while back, wasn't it?
He did get Me Too'd a while ago, yeah.
And he resigned, I think, didn't he?
So he's back in here, I think, after issuing his mea culpas, getting his words in. I'm sure he's kissed somebody's ass in the process.
So that's enough for this article. Who's going next?
That very good points there, Tom. Though I mean, I just thought it's incredible. Like and that was what the thing that was so irritating about these articles. Every one where it's a group of men trying to be good men,
Right.
often, speaking explicitly about male virtue. Like there's a website, one of the articles was about a website called the Art of Manliness. Apparently,
Right.
I don't know anything about it, but it's run by a Mormon husband and wife, and it's all about, getting back to ways of being manly and what manly virtues are. And again, how to be the best man you can be so you can make a contribution to your culture, so you can love other men and women and make a great society. And all they have is scorn for that.
And what's really funny is that the art of manliness is as just steeped in blue pill ideology.
It is.
Possibly be. This is the kind of thing that I read Art of Manliness, and I think they are sending men to the chopping block.
They are. Yeah, it's all about male disposability.
Feminists ought to be grateful for this, but I don't think they study their subject enough to even really know the difference between Voice for Men and the Art of Manliness. I think they see them all as the same thing. And Return of Kings. It's totally bizarre.
Yeah, I mean anything. Well, they just don't like anything other than men in a state of complete confusion, helplessness, self-hatred,
and
shame, subservience. Totally apologizing for themselves, killing themselves, stuck in their parents' basement. Just anything they want men. I mean, Susanna Walters said it right there in 2017. And why can't we hate men? They want men to step back from the power. They do not want men to be in any positions of power. So they don't care if the men are like gynocentric men who essentially want to elevate women and put women on a pedestal and serve women or anything. They don't want men in society at all. They want them to be a subservient group of work slaves who say nothing except, yes, ma'am, and I'm sorry for being male. That's all they want.
It's true. It's true.
Well, I've got one. Would you like me to go into this particular?
Go, Paul.
Yeah.
Pablum. We have, let me see here. Let me pull this up. An article titled "The Manosphere's Existential Crisis is Building the Future of the Far Right." Now, this is a common narrative from what we see. The author, her name doesn't really matter in this. This could have been written by any feminist. We'll say her name
was the same one that wrote the one that I did.
Yeah.
Actually.
Oh, all right.
Oh, was it? Oh, I didn't realize
Tracy
that.
Clark Flory, I think.
Yeah. Flory or Flora, something like that. And what Feminist X is, it works just fine for me. One, she doesn't really describe, and of course, as you might suspect, this is about labeling all red pill factions as ultimately right of Donald Trump, dangerous Elliot Rogers waiting to happen. We've seen this. This is nothing new. I mean, I probably should have even picked a different piece because they've been so redundant about this. Now, she did not really explain what she meant by the existential crisis for the manosphere. I mean, I think she implied that it was the factioning of MRAs, PUAs, incels, MGTOW, and all red pill groups sort of being at war with each other. She wasn't really very plain and erotic, but I think that was the implication. And what I found intriguing about this piece, though, is that I think that she is absolutely right on a number of points here. The red pill community does lead a lot of liberal men to more conservative thinking, that when they start peeling back the blinders on how they've been living, their experiences in family court, and like a lot of us, many of us, Tom included, myself included, I know lots of others, have a background in one way or another of being very invested in understanding women's issues. And a lot of guys come into the red pill community with this. Yes. This attitude, okay, now I'm going to look at men's issues, and then they get a big fat rude awakening of the reaction that happens to them when they start talking about men's issues.
Right.
And I think in the way that sort of the reaction that they get from the feminist community and from many women, from a lot of men, pushes them more toward, let's look at something else here. There is a lot of support for Trump in our community, tons of it. And there's some critique of Trump in the community too. But I have to say, I think she's right. I mean, of course, she goes way off the deep end, because what she's trying to insinuate is that this is how you produce mass murderers. I'm surprised she didn't bring up Anders Breivik, because that was the intent. She could have had a lot more impact if she would have even talked about that case instead of the Roger case. But a lot of this is the same bullshit diatribe about, oh yes, Paul Elam wrote Bash a Violent Bitch 10 frickin' years ago. It's like, can you guys please find something I've written recently to critique? I get a few more clicks out of that. But they go back to that as though Bash a Violent Bitch is my middle name, and provide no context. And what she did do, which I think is really important, is she said that I alleged to have, or that I later said that article was in response to a Jezebel piece where they were bragging about beating up their boyfriends. And indeed it was. And I said that at the time I wrote it. So I don't know where she got the idea that I came up with this later, that I later said it was a response. Well, I said it in the original piece.
Yeah, I remember.
It made no bones about the fact. And what she's telling her readers, and I think her readers are accepting this fully with no problem, is that, yes, so what? So what? We wrote an article glorifying bashing our boyfriends, beating them up, destroying their property, hurting them. That's fine for us to do. And the problem was really the way I reacted to it. And she made similar attacks on Roosh and pointed out that Roosh is now practicing Orthodox Christianity, which I think is great for Roosh. But she sees that as evil too. And websites like Return of Kings. But the whole parade of dribble is nothing more than an excuse to say, if you're red pill, we're going to perceive you as a threat. It is just much more of a whitewashing of feminist evil that really is in the world, and creating a fake narrative that men are somehow dangerous.
Yeah. That's about it, and I mean, I'm not going to even talk about mine because it's not worth reading. I couldn't tell you what the argument was, except that it's very concerning to this writer that MRA ideas, or really red pill ideas, because she doesn't distinguish, as you say, Paul, she doesn't distinguish between specific MRA ideas and any other idea that dissents from feminist orthodoxy. So just basically that dissent from feminist orthodoxy is becoming more mainstream, because we now have a president who can actually say that he worries about young men, that it's different.
And I say, you're damn right it is.
Yeah, that's it. That's the thing that is so ridiculous about all of these articles, is that they will mention red pill ideas and simply mention them as if the idea itself is so ludicrous, so preposterous, that no attempt whatsoever to engage with it need be made. And that just outrages them, that a man like Trump can actually say he is concerned about false allegations, and that others also have raised the specter of false allegations as a peril for men of all ages, that there is a man in the vice presidential office who will not have closed door meetings or go out to lunch with anyone but his wife, and just mention that as, oh my goodness, the most ridiculous. Oh, it's laughable. It's contemptible. They don't even make an argument about why. So so that's it. I mean, I came, my few takeaways from my article were that the way to write a feminist article today about anything to do with men is, one, you always bring you always start with your conclusions. So you don't begin with any kind of serious analysis of data. You don't interview any actual men who are, host any of these websites or anything. You just begin with your conclusions that any man who dissents from feminism is a danger. I mean, their obsession with incels now is all encompassing.
And I've had moments where I have to say, and I'm somewhat embarrassed by it, is like, thank God, go pick on somebody else for a while. I'm tired of hearing you about MRAs.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they are savaging the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right.
Get into it. The most defenseless. And of course, that's what bullies do.
Yeah.
What I notice about all this 20 articles, not one line, not one word dedicated to understanding any of the men's issues that men's advocates
That's it.
attention to. And none of it exists. Men, for all practical purposes, don't.
That's it. Yeah.
The other thing that got me was that women seem to have a license to shame men.
Yeah.
I mean, no one bats an eye at this 20 articles that shame men over and over again, but the reverse is simply not true.
Yeah.
I mean, no man's magazine could ever get away with this.
No man's magazine would be interested in 20 articles mocking women.
Right. Yes.
Speaking about their concerns with contempt, never attempting to understand the context out of which their movement has come, or anything. I mean, it's absolutely unimaginable. It really is. Yeah.
That didn't stop Flory, though, from insinuating that of all the 6,000, nearly 7,000 articles that are on ABFM, she insinuates that most of them are attacking women.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It is not even close to the truth.
Yeah.
That's her experience. And so she expects that to be your experience too.
Yeah. They don't do research in any of these articles. I mean, the article that mine was, men's rights activists, how they swallowed the world. It had all sorts of links in the text of the article, and they were all links. Well, not all, but most of them were links to other Jezebel articles or other feminist articles.
By God, back it up. And after all, we got David Futrell on our side. We'll link to We Hunted the Mammoth.
Yeah, I mean, just amazing. Like the dishonesty, the lack of integrity. And that's the thing. I think that is my ultimate takeaway, is that there is no longer even an attempt to argue about any of these issues. I think, we can say, if we want to be positive about this issue, is that it really shows that most feminists have now given up on arguing with men's rights activists. Yeah. They're not going to argue about false allegations. They're not going to argue about parental alienation. They're not going to talk about paternity fraud. They're not going to talk about, incarceration rates for men. They're not going to talk about homelessness. They're just not going to touch any of that stuff. They're just going to go straight to the idea of violence. They're going to unfairly link that to all incels and indeed to all red pill guys, because they don't make a distinction between incels and anybody else. Right. And that's basically it, because I think they realize that they can't argue with any of these issues. So they're just going to keep sounding the alarm, and they're going to rely on the same old gynocentrism, the chivalry of readers, the women's unconscious demand that they be protected in every single circumstance, that men put themselves in harm's way to make sure that they're safe. They're going to rely on all those things they supposedly reject, all those elements of traditional masculinity and traditional, gender roles, in order to dismiss and encourage readers not to look seriously at any dissent from feminism. And that's all they've got. It's in a way a tribute to the much greater substance of those who are actually arguing against feminism, that they can't even try to argue.
I think it's also a tribute to men, because men don't get upset about this stuff. mean, they write these nasty articles like this, and men, oh, okay. It's like they don't get plussed one way or the other. It's like that shows maturity too, you know?
Most men just keep on.
Doing what they're doing.
Keeping the lights on, fixing your computer, making sure your toilet flushes.
And I wish they wouldn't. I really do.
Yeah, me too. I want a general strike of men. I want a general strike of men until the hatred stops.
Huh.
Yep. I would love for them.
I like the sound of that.
Offices of Jezebel and say, well, you're not going to have electricity for the next few months.
Yeah.
Try generating your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
me too. I'd really.
The future is female.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure it is.
Except for the electrical future. That's not.
Well, usually we come to sort of a sad and depressing ending because of the nature of these issues. What have you, every time we do a regarding men discussion, we end up kind of on a sour note. And I'm ending up on an apathetic note today, and I think that's good.
Well, that's good. And I'd like to end on a more positive note because I want to tell people about regarding men and what we're doing there and the fantastic groups we're running and how much it's really helped. The men love these groups, and they're run by Paul, Janice, Tom, and Mike Buchanan from the UK. So, and we have groups every day, right, Paul?
Every day of the week, and we're getting ready to add on more. Now, I guess I'll go ahead and take this opportunity. I've been doing a group on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and have really enjoyed that. But I'm going to switch the times. I'm doing it at 7 o'clock tonight Eastern, but a week from today, I'll be switching the time and doing it at 2 p.m. Eastern time so that we can have something that's a little more user-friendly for our audience in the UK and Europe. Hopefully, that'll give them something to attend without, because they're showing up now like at midnight for them.
Yeah.
And we need to do a little better for that. So we're going to start, and I'll be putting that on the Facebook page soon.
Yep. But all kinds of things are happening there, guys. Come on and join us. Mm-hmm. It's fantastic.
Yeah. It is really, really remarkable what is going on.
Yes.
We've talked about this before, that a lot of times after the facilitator checks out, the groups go on for hours after that, because there's an appetite for red pill men to have peers they can talk to without hiding who they are. I mean, that's part of it right there.
And I think a new record was set, Paul.
A new one? And yet another new one?
Oh, no.
I think
How
it's
many hours?
13 and a half hours after the group.
Insane. Wow.
And men will just stay after the group and just communicate and talk and whatever, come in and out. And this is what we want.
Friendships, start real world friendships.
I mean, these guys are getting to know each other's lives.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Absolutely.
Well, what happened to so-and-so this week? You know, and did you get the job? I mean, they know that you went to an interview. It's like a community. And
so
it's potent.
The link below to Regarding Men.
Priceless.
And if you haven't joined, join.
Regardingmen.com/join. Regardingmen.com/join. Come on, see us.
Link below. And with that,
are we finished?
I think we had enough putas for a brothel.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll just award Jezebel.
Ooh, Jezaputa.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jezeflying Puta.
Yes.
There she goes.
Yes, there she goes.
That's good.
Hopefully flying straight to her.
All right, and there's one more thing. It's men
are
good.
All right, twice in a row.
We're getting so good. All right.
Y'all take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.